This is Do School Better, a podcast for people who want to transform education. My name is Doris Korda, and for the past several years, I've been training educators. Listen to these episodes and hear about some of the extraordinary programs they've created. We call these pioneers the fire starters. See if you can get some ideas that you can implement yourself to change your own practice.
In this episode, Doris speaks with Rachel Mullen, upper school Spanish teacher at Hawken School. Rachel shares how her students advance their Spanish communications, cultural awareness, and collaboration skills by working on a creative project for a multicultural marketing agency.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Doris.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm great. Excited to talk to you. So, Rachel, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, great. My name is Rachel, and I teach Spanish at Hawken Upper School, and I've been teaching for 12 years. And in my Spanish 4 honors class, we study a unit on media and television. And before I started teaching Spanish at Hawken, I spent a year in the business world working at National City Bank in their multicultural marketing department. And so I wanted to incorporate my experiences in multicultural marketing into my classroom. And I came to the workshop last summer because I wanted to find out ways to incorporate the principles that Doris and her team uses in the entrepreneurship program into my classes.
Yeah, so you wanted to learn how to use real world problems and all those methods along with it. So
absolutely.
So you like everybody, what my goal is at the workshop is for everybody to get what they need to be able to implement a pilot of these methods. And you're a Spanish teacher in a high school class. And before you get into the details, So you said, and I remember you're struggling, and the question was, all right, if what I want them to do is, if I have these learning objectives, how can I set up a real problem that they'll care about, that will result in their learning this? And can you talk a little bit about what your learning objectives were for the students before you even get into the details of how you did it?
Yes. So my major learning objectives for this pilot was for students to be able to watch television commercials in Spanish that were produced for Spanish-speaking audiences, and really be able to pick out the cultural values that were important to the Hispanic community, especially the Hispanic communities in the United States, and how multicultural marketing agencies try to incorporate these core cultural values to market products and services to Hispanics in the United States, and then be able to apply what their knowledge of the Spanish language and also the cultural knowledge that they deduced from watching the television commercials to create their own television commercial for the Spanish-speaking people in the United States.
And so you as you have wanted for years, I'm sure, in this class, you wanted your students to learn, kind of deeply learn the norms and cultures of the Hispanic community. Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Talk about your pilot, what you were trying to do and how you set it up, and then how it went.
So I asked students to choose a product or service that they would like to advertise to the Hispanic communities in the United States. And each student had a choice of what product or service that he or she thought was important and thought was worthy to make a television commercial for. And these products or services could have been products or services that they or the students, my students or their families used, or it could be a product or a service that they thought would be worthy to advertise to Spanish speakers in the United States. And so at first they had to research the product or service and really be able to give details to convince their classmates why this product or service was so important and so good that they wanted to make a television commercial in Spanish to advertise it to reach a larger population. And so my students came to class the first day prepared to give a 1-minute product pitch to their classmates in order to convince the other people in the class why it would be worthwhile to advertise their product or service with a Spanish television commercial.
And were these pitches in English or Spanish?
These pitches were in Spanish.
That's so cool. And then they voted, and then what?
So my students voted on the products. My classes are small, so we got to choose 4 products. And so after the students voted, we started studying how to go about making a television commercial in Spanish. And we saw many examples of television commercials in Spanish and also in English. And one of the campaigns that we studied very well was the Got Milk campaign, which is one of the longest and most successful marketing campaigns in the United States that has run in both Spanish and English. And this campaign was begun in English to the wide market, and then Grupo Gallegos, which is the multicultural marketing agency that took over the campaign in Spanish, started producing television commercials and print ads and radio ads in Spanish a few years later.
Oh, that's interesting. So they studied this, and what was the learning? What was it like when they were studying that? What did you see?
So first, this campaign was interesting to study because everyone has seen a Got Milk print ad, or has seen a Got, the famous mustache. So it was something that this advertising campaign was a campaign that was just so familiar to the students that they had seen it, and they had seen many, many examples in English, but I knew they probably hadn't seen how a multicultural marketing agency chose to market milk to Spanish speakers all across the United States. And so what we did was we first analyzed the messaging and the cultural values and the tone of the ad, the strategy that the advertisers were using in English. And then I gave them a few minutes to say, okay, now you are Grupo Gallegos. You are this multicultural marketing agency in California. The California Milk Processor Board has now hired you, the class, to market milk to Spanish speakers in the United States. And I gave them a few minutes, to think about who are the celebrities that they're going to use. Are they going to use celebrities like the Got Milk campaign does in English? What is the message? Who is the audience? What is the slogan? What are you going to do with the campaign slogan Got Milk? Are you going to keep translate it directly, or are you going to create the idea and keep the same messaging? And so they had to figure out how they would transcreate the message, or how they would change the message, if at all. And so then after we got their ideas flowing, we saw what Grupo Gallegos produced in Spanish to market milk.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And we saw print ads and also television commercials. And so the students really got to see, wow, there is the messaging is different in some ways.
Yeah.
And comical, actually.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so you've been teaching for years. You've been teaching in these Spanish courses,
yes,
culture, and how was this interesting? I mean, I can tell from what you're saying that they didn't just straight up translate the English Got Milk ads into Spanish. Mm-hmm. There was more to it than that.
Yes.
And I think it's really clever that you had them, before you showed them what what was actually implemented, you had them think about themselves, what they would do and what they would consider. So how was that experience of the students engaging in a discussion or thought process about culture? Was that effective? Was it different?
I found that it was very effective because instead of me lecturing and telling them these are the cultural values that you find in commercials across the board, they really had to observe what they saw and what they heard and the language and the messaging that they were hearing and in these commercials, and deduce what exactly infer what they thought the cultural values, and the cultural values are really important, because if you don't have that cultural connection, if that cultural connection is off, then you're not going to be able to sell the product or service from an advertising perspective.
And they already at this point, so they already know that they're going to be creating their own commercial after this.
Yes. And
they're going to be showing it to an audience that includes people who really know their stuff. Yes. And you'll get to that later. Yes. So they're motivated in a big way to learn from this, because they know they're going to have to apply it themselves.
Absolutely. So the students got to see a lot of different examples, not only from the Got Milk campaign, but I also carefully chose television commercials in Spanish and English from a bunch of different companies. For example, Home Depot, MasterCard, McDonald's, and a number of other companies that advertise in the United States to both the English-speaking population and the Spanish-speaking population.
And again, they were totally engaged through all that.
Yes. And they had to analyze the differences that they saw, and also present in front of the class, what is the messaging, what is the tone, who is the audience, what is the slogan, and and then in English, and then also in Spanish, how did that messaging change, or how did the audience change, or how did the tone change, and also what are the cultural values, what do we value in the United States versus and how do advertisers connect with their audience versus how do advertisers, marketing agencies connect with their audience in Spanish. And so they really got to see a lot of examples as a way to prepare them for making their own commercial.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then when they had voted for the top products, and you formed teams?
Yes. So my students voted for the top 4 or 5 products or services that they wanted to make television commercials for. And I asked them to rank on a piece of paper the top 3 products that they would like to help make a commercial for. And so I gave all students either their first or second choice for the product or service that they wanted to make their commercial for. And I think every student was happy with the team that they were on, as far as their interest in the product or service.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. And so then what?
So then that was watching many examples and analyzing examples in the Got Milk campaign, and also in the other different companies that advertise in both Spanish and English. After that, we got to speak with a multicultural marketing executive who works for a multicultural marketing agency in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
And my students got to speak with her, and also one of her creative team members who's a native Spanish speaker. And my students got to ask all types of questions to these multicultural marketing gurus about making TV commercials, or how to go about it. And they got to speak in Spanish with these 2 women, and got to receive all types of advice about how to get started, what to look for, what type of messaging they think they should have. And so my students really got to ask the experts. They only had about 25 minutes to ask their questions and receive advice about how to go about making a television commercial. So that was our next step.
And our teachers are finding they're some of them surprised that people out in industry are really, really happy to give a half-hour phone call to a bunch of high school kids. And why is talk about what that half-hour or 20-minute call did for your students in terms of their engagement?
So that half an hour call really gave them, I think, motivation, number one, to create a worthwhile product, knowing that experts were going to be viewing their television commercial when it was completed. I think it also gave the project its own type of autonomy, and really let the students know that wow, there are people in the world that that use Spanish in a real life setting and create television commercials and create messages. And these messages are very, very, very important in how they reflect cultural values and give information to Spanish speakers in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you did that. I think bringing the real world in and having the students go out and experience, wow, this is real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. A huge motivator. So then they leave that 20-minute call and they're really motivated. And then what did they do?
So that night, my students had a journal entry that they had to work on. And in this journal entry, I gave them many different questions, many different reflection questions about how they were going to approach writing the television script. And so this journal entry, it wasn't long, not a long reflection, but I wanted them to come to the table with some ideas so that they could use their work time well. A couple of the questions that I included in their pre-group work journal entry was, who is the target audience? What is the tone? What do you think the tone of the commercial should be? What are the cultural values that you're going to try to include? What is the messaging going to be like? What do you want the audience to think, feel, and do with the information that you're going to give them about your product or service?
That's awesome.
And so there was a lot to think about. Also, what is the product or service? What are some adjectives in Spanish that you would use to describe your product or service? And so the students really had to come prepared to use their work time well. And I think that's super, super, super important. And I also wanted to give credit to everyone for coming prepared to work together so that they not only were using their work time well, but that they came to the table with some valuable ideas that they wanted the group to think about.
Yeah, I mean, you heard me say this a bunch in the workshop, but what you just said is so important, that in order to learn things in such a way that you can really apply them in a lot of contexts, you have to not only apply, but you have to reflect. You have to have that time to reflect on what you've learned and make those connections and think about the why. So I love the assignment that you gave them and when you placed it. Really important. So then they, as a team, in whatever class time you had, and this is a single class, they're working as a team to produce their commercial. What was that like?
It was interesting to watch the students come in with their ideas, and the work is all going on in Spanish. So they're negotiating. Yeah. So they're accomplishing a real life task in Spanish. Number one, they're practicing the language. And number two, they're really learning how to negotiate their ideas and put together moving different pieces to try to create a coherent, interesting, engaging 1-minute television spot. So it was interesting to watch them figure all that out in one class period, and that was an 80-minute class period. So they had to work efficiently, and whatever they didn't finish for homework was for homework. So they had to figure out how to work outside of class if they needed extra time.
So along the way, these teams are working and they're creating this. And then what's their deadline look like? What did they know they were up against?
So I believe I gave them a class period to work together. And then after that, they had to, the following class period, they had to turn in a rough draft of a script, of their television script to me.
Wow.
And it's not long. It's only a minute, but they really had to incorporate a lot of different details into a 1-minute television commercial. And I told them that was going to be the hardest part, to be able to get the good stuff in there and your messaging and your audience and your tone in there in that short amount of time. And that's really I think was the hardest part for the students, to pick and choose what was important and also to eliminate what was not important. And some of the groups did really well with writing a rough draft of their television script, and other students really missed the ball. Other groups really missed the ball. And it was hard. It was hard too to give them that feedback, like, wow, I think you really need to begin over. Yeah. But that was a great lesson, I think, for some of the students, because in marketing, there are tight deadlines with advertising, especially. And so it was kind of a taste of the real world. Like, I don't think this is going to work. I think we need to rework some things. And so, but they did it. And they came back with it. They came back and took my feedback into consideration, and they did it. So
they had iterations, and they had to refine, and they got feedback, and they had to revise and refine and recreate. And so what ultimately, when all was said and done and they were finished with their commercials, what did that look like? Were these written commercials? Did they produce videos?
Yeah, they produced videos, and the students were given also one day to film in class. And they could also have filmed outside of class, but I gave them an entire 80-minute block to film. And I told them that I would help them with whatever they needed to film, if they needed someone to hold the camera or whatever they needed, that I would be able to help them with that.
And so then when they were done, they had a deadline, and they sent those to be reviewed and evaluated by the same women they'd spoken to at the beginning, yes?
Yes, that's correct. And so the multicultural marketers were able to view these videos ahead of time. Wow. But the students didn't know that. And so when we came to class, once the videos were submitted, I set up another Skype call with the two women out of the multicultural marketing firm in Denver. And the students got to present their videos or their TV commercials to the marketers and received real live feedback from experts. And, and they were very honest, which was really, really, really good. And the honest feedback was just incredible because the students were able to, I think, receive the feedback a little bit, easier, but it was more valued because these are experts in the field. It's not me, just the Spanish teacher giving them feedback. It's real experts. If they were really to air these commercials, these are some of the critiques or things that they would have taken into consideration before airing or even producing the commercial.
Oh, wow. And this is all being done in Spanish?
Yes, absolutely. All the feedback is being given in Spanish.
And so what do you think of what happened there with the whole thing? Was it a good experience as a teacher? What did you experience with this?
I thought it was great. The students got to interact with experts in the marketing field. And so the pilot was, I think, given a lot of credibility in that respect because they were getting feedback from people who do this for a living and breathe it in and day out and know what's good and what's not as far as creating television spots. And I also thought it was really interesting to see how the groups worked through issues and if there was a problem that arose, who kind of brought the team together to figure out how to fix the problem.
So what are some of the things your students learned?
They definitely learned that creating a television spot is a messy process. I think
I'm sure
that it's not cut and dry, and sometimes the first iteration of a television script might not be the one that you should go with to produce a TV spot, and that's okay. And that's okay. Yeah. It's okay not to have a great idea the first time. I think that's a really important message. Great ideas don't come about the first time most of the time, and it takes a group of people to really sit around a table and, give and take and really try to collaborate together and respect one another's ideas at the same time. I also hope that my students learn a little bit about the process of creating a TV spot as well, especially some of the main points, the takeaways that they learned from speaking with the two women and the multicultural marketing firm in Denver as well.
So if I'm a parent, a Hawken parent, and I say, hey, but Rachel, you're this incredible Spanish teacher and you're teaching at this college prep school and you're teaching honors level Spanish classes, etc. Great, but I'm not sure I really care that my kid knows how to create a commercial. This was Spanish class. What did they learn? Academic. Like, is this academic to you? Is this learning? Is this school?
Absolutely. First of all, I think they learned that there are careers out there that they can apply their knowledge of the Spanish language and then their knowledge of the Hispanic culture, the different Hispanic cultures, to the business field. And that what they're learning is a very specific skill that they can apply to and actually expand their knowledge in other career fields that they might not know have existed. That's the first thing.
So it's relevant.
It's absolutely
Yeah,
relevant.
exactly.
And especially how the Hispanic population is growing in the United States, having this specific skill and this skill set, especially of speaking another language and being able to begin to understand different cultures is huge.
Wow, that's massive. So were they engaged? Was it exciting? How do you feel about it? How is it different for you? And how is it for you as a teacher?
So I really enjoyed this project, and I hope to do it again in years to come. And I really think that giving the students choice is really, really, really important, because once you give them choice, I relinquished, the control of the classroom in a way. And because I was able to give up some of this control and give my students choice in what they were going to make a commercial for, that was meaningful. And I think that they really enjoyed having say in the process.
Well, and from what I've heard about how your pilot went, it sounds like all your students were really, really engaged. And that's what all of us as teachers hope for, and it's hard to get.
Yes, they were engaged, and I think they were able to apply what their background knowledge of the language to really use their creativity and teamwork to create something original, which is very special.
Yeah. So I remember very clearly at the workshop that at the beginning you were really struggling with, I don't know, these methods, how can I apply them in a Spanish class?
Absolutely.
And how do you feel about that now?
I hope to do it more.
That's awesome.
I hope to think of ways. I hope to think of ways to include problems that are real and matter to the students, and to use authentic audiences as much as possible in other ways.
And all these methods that you've employed and executed so well, Rachel, I'm very excited, and I think your pilot was a phenomenal success, and I'm really excited to see what you do in the rest of your courses.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for talking with me.
Yay. Thanks for talking with me.
If you like the podcast, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. For more information about our training, go to wildfire-education.org.